What's up, world? My name is Corey Stay Trapping. This is Trap Talks, where we discuss the intersection of culture and tech. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Wanona Statcher. We actually met in Durham, North Carolina. And we'll run through a real quick intro for her just so you all know what we're going to discuss today. She was the former neighborhood development specialist and founder slash creative director of the Durham Urban Innovation Center with the city of Durham. You've been a part of what, two venture accelerators now? EHO,
hmm
and Moving Worlds Apprenticeship. Is that correct?
Actually, three now.
Three now.
Which is now Coreless, Moving Worlds, and Climate for Venture Tech, which is a clean tech accelerator.
Got it. And last, but what you're actually working on now, she is the co-founder for Mākhers Studio LLC, working on cool stuff around taking shipping containers and basically making them for affordable housing. And she's going to also discuss the work that you're doing with NASA, which is like really incredible. But yeah, was there anything else you wanted to add to that? Your intro?
Ah,
Okay, cool.
yeah, I think I went out for
Right,
a
right,
minute.
through the screen. Yeah. Cool. So you're doing work with NASA. I wanna start there because I didn't know I had heard of Astro. So my question here was around astro mining is getting more important, and NASA has plans to uh, has goals. Their NASA Vision 2040 to basically have a community living in outer space. And so this question here was asking her, basically why is this important? Um, and also too, how does she get connected with NASA? By 2032. Why is um why is space exploration and astronaut and all that stuff so important to people like Elon Musk, NASA, and whoever else is trying to go to the moon?
Yeah, and I apologize for some reason my streaming is off today. Um,
It's all
so hopefully I
good.
won't have to. So hopefully I won't have to go off video. I know that helps sometimes, but
Yeah.
so we just started talking with. Well, we've been talking with NASA and NASA's counterparts, NASA Goddard, and partners for about 12 weeks now on various topics. I was invited to attend a summit in the end of February, early March, in Orlando. Didn't really know what it was going to be about, but was pleasantly surprised. My whole world changed when I learned about the vision of NASA to essentially habitat or habitate, if you will, live on the moon to be able to do research on Mars and other planets. And their vision is 2040, which includes equity and inclusion in that, what we call the space economy, as well as uh, uh, supporting and providing the ability for sustainable exploration in outer space. So it used to be where the sky's the limit, but now the universe is the limit, right? And I did not know that NASA and their partners were this far along. So even though that's NASA's vision for 2040, in a nutshell, um, their partners are moving very quickly, partner companies with commercialization, and of course, as you've seen with Blue Origin and SpaceX, and the fact that NASA really has privatized a lot of the work that they've done, and so NASA is now trying to figure out what is NASA, what are they going to be doing. But part of that is to incorporate small businesses as part of this huge multi-trillion dollar space economy. And so what does that mean for us? I mean, that means that we are kind of behind on this whole other world, if you will, no pun intended, of technology, human exploration, expansion, that it's not science fiction anymore. It is real. And we're talking about companies that are partnering with fashion moguls and companies to design astronaut suits. We're talking about companies that are using modular architecture like what we do to provide in orbit living for scientists and researchers by 2026, 2027. So it's right around the corner
Right.
for these companies, even 3D printing and additive manufacturing, which, Mr. Corey, you have heard a lot more of these days. So it's not something that's not here, it's past here. And that means that we should be catching up with the opportunity for us to build locally, to create local supply chains, to participate in this space economy.
Got it. Got it. So I know we kind of jumped to the NASA thing, but I wanted to start off where, because you're from in Atlanta, that's where you grew up
Yes.
at, and then I met you when you went to Durham.
Right.
What was it like, growing up in Atlanta? You like the changes that you see now? Kind of like a two-part.
Some of them, yeah. Atlanta was great growing up. I call it old Atlanta. A lot's changed since then, and sometimes as things change, and when they say the same, and some changes are going to happen, and some changes are great, while some changes are not so great because they don't include or incorporate the work that was done prior to in an equitable way. Whether that means real estate, where communities are gentrified, whether that means policies around continuing inclusivity, which we know a lot of that's changing for a lot of reasons. Markets change for a lot of reasons. Demographics change for a lot of reasons. And so growing up for me, I loved it because there was almost sort of two parts. There was, of course, the foundational civil rights piece and community engagement piece and Black-owned, Black wealth starting in the city. That's one of the major cities for civil rights movement at that time, which of course continues a little bit in our city, but unfortunately not as much as I hope to see. But then on the other side of that, you had the Olympics, which did two things. One, it created an expanded international community, but it also led to major displacement of Black and brown communities, specifically Black communities, especially in public housing, because all that had to be destroyed for what politicians wanted to see, which was what they call a revitalization of the city for sports. And we're actually seeing that again with the World Cup coming to Atlanta. And so the question now is, are we going to do something different or do the same? Are we going to displace people? Or are we actually going to participate in equity beforehand? Not just doing it because of a sports event, major sports event, but because we actually care. And so we see a trickle of some of those great things that I grew up around. Like I said, people being who they are and being free, or feeling free to discover new communities, new neighborhoods, no matter who they were, what they looked like. It was one of the things I loved about growing up here. I will say a big part of growing up here was, unfortunately, still participating in the busing system. So I had to take two buses to get to and from school. And of course, history will tell you that's because of the school segregation and then school integration from busing students from predominantly Black-owned community to a predominantly white-owned community for better schools, instead of money being put to create better schools in all neighborhoods. And that was in the 90s. And so, one could argue that the good part about that is that provides more opportunities to go to a better public school. The other argument is we shouldn't have done that.
Right.
And so, we should have the opportunity to have quality public schools and choices in our community to be able to live, work, play, and thrive in the same area. Of course, the music scene was quite amazing. Now looking back on it is even more amazing than when it was happening.
Right.
And so you're talking about, growing up with Outkast, and of course, rest in peace to Dungeon family, Rico Wade, who just passed away, which was a big surprise. But that legacy of what Andre Three Stacks said, the South got something to say, started then, really, and has continued because of the foundation that was set in the different way of storytelling through music and entertainment, and sports. And so a very, very cool place at that time. I don't know if a lot of people know how integrated it was in certain communities, especially the inner city communities, which made it even more valuable and more exciting because I got to see the materialization of all that happened and all the work that was done prior to my being born. But now those shifts are changing dramatically, where communities, like in a lot of large cities where you are included, Corey, are seeing major shifts in who lives there, who's allowed to live there. Allowed meaning what land use policies reflect, the opportunity for all, no matter what income level that you are in, based off of what society says you are in.
Yeah.
The communities that were once all white became predominantly black, and now those communities are turning predominantly white again, but are very expensive. And the community that I live in now, the neighborhood I live in now, is big example of that, where homes were going for $50,000 in the 70s, 80s, maybe 70,000 in the 90s, now are going for $1 million. So you talk about a high barrier of entry for those that created the cultural phenomena that Atlanta has become, are not able to participate in that.
Yeah. That's a lot to actually unpack, and I think that's a really good segue into what Mākhers Studio is and where you got the inspiration to start it with you and your husband. So we'd love to delve into that, and because I think it ties into obviously the affordable housing, right? That's very like
that's exactly right. That was the experience, right, of having to take two school buses. I mean, you're talking about kids having to get to the school bus stop by 5:30 to get on one bus, go to the stadium, switch buses, wait for all the other buses, and then get another bus to go to a better school. Well, we couldn't afford to live where those better schools are, right? And so everything starts at home. And unfortunately, what happens in our society is that kids are often seen that their success is dependent on the zip code that they come from, and it shouldn't be that way. And when I talk about this, it's not just black and brown communities. I mean, you see it in rural America, white America as well, and indigenous communities as well. And so it's amazing how housing is becoming, in some ways, a great connector, but in a lot of ways, not so much. In fact, the Supreme Court this week has been ruling, or will be ruling on homelessness and the ability for states to essentially criminalize being homeless, which is not a great idea. We also saw, I believe, in Sedona, Arizona recently, I think it was Sedona, where the idea, the solution that the city council came up with, which they thought was a good idea, was to say that people who are homeless, it's okay to live in your car, but that's all you can do, and we're going to provide a certain number of parking spaces for you to do that between 8 at night and 10 in the morning. That's just not a solution. And so for me, it was personal. To start this company, and then of course, as you mentioned, Corey, working with the city of Durham, North Carolina, my first and last city job, government job, which was difficult, and for a lot of reasons, but it was awesome in a lot of reasons as well. Is part of it being awesome was the experience of working with fair housing and housing specialists who were part of the mediation between slumlords and those that are typically discriminated against, whether you're single mom or a family or a minority or a LGBTQ person and persons. And so to see that firsthand, I came from the design side of things, designing, graduating from architecture, landscape architecture programs, communities, but now we're talking about the actual policies behind why things happen the way they do and how people are able to do whatever they want to do in certain states, most states, because they're landlord friendly, not tenant friendly. So when you start looking at all the reasons why things don't work, it's like there has to be a solution, and that is affordable housing. Of course, that term is heavily loaded, and it takes a lot of education. I've talked with some colleagues recently who say they call it, what do they call it? They don't call it affordable housing. They call it like accessible housing or something like that, because we're talking about teachers, we're talking about police officers, tradesmen and women, college students, parents that are aging out. This is not just about individuals who are homeless or who have drug addictions, and I don't think people realize that we're sort of all one or two paychecks away from being on the streets ourselves, and so everything starts at home. The communities, and you know this, Corey, that affects how you become a certain type of citizen, right, or resident, how you treat people, and how do you fare in school. And so how could we come up, what would be a solution from a design and built environment infrastructure standpoint that we could reimagine existing land in cities that typically is really expensive, but using smaller spaces and being sustainable. And that's where Mākhers Studio came from. So we started in 2017 back here in Atlanta. We've been going ever since. And just now really gaining traction. As you know, Corey, startup world is not easy. And one of my colleagues said it takes 5 to 7 years for a startup to be an overnight success. So we're on year 7 and just finally getting where we want to be. And so it is a housing crisis globally, which is a very scalable opportunity to solve. You can solve it here, you can solve it really anywhere, especially Atlanta. Atlanta, for it to be such a culturally rich place, is one of the most inequitable places to live, which is really embarrassing. And so we're excited that the city has contacted us to partner to see what we can do with our shipping container spaces. And so we build, right now, our focus is shipping container fabrication and recycling, and turning those into energy efficient, sustainable, modular housing. So essentially small spaces for big impact that you can put anywhere, no matter what the land costs are, and still be pretty affordable, but with quality work. And so that's and to my husband's side, he's director of operations for our company. He's also a Marine Corps veteran. And we know that veterans are one of the highest demographics of homelessness as well, which is really sad for this country. As you know, we pride ourselves on patriotism, and then it's like, okay, but our veterans are on the streets. That's unacceptable. So that's how Mākhers Studio started. And philosophically, a big part of that is, of course, we talked about this at last meeting, is to really build. Talking with NASA and seeing the work that people are doing in the space economy, and they're ready to head up and head out and take their supply chains with them, means we're behind. Our kids need to learn how to build and make things, not just play games, but build games. Build environments using VR, AR, and AI, and learn those skills. And otherwise, we're really going to be left behind more than what we are. And so Mākhers is really about a woman-owned business where we make things and we build equity, not just in the infrastructure, but in the policies that we hope to support.
Yeah. That's really cool when you was telling me about where you got the idea from to start it. Where did the idea around making sure it had like a good environmental impact? I worked in the solar renewable energy space, so depending on who you talk to, they may say, panels and batteries are actually worse for the environment because of all the mining. But then you have the other argument saying, well, we don't have to use as much gasoline. But when did you start, I guess, incorporating more of the environmental impact into your container development?
Sure. So the very, I would say the very beginning of that conversation is how we build. Construction is extremely bad. The way we build now is not that great for the environment. I think we're probably like the second most carbon emissive industry in the world. And then we're talking about cities like New York. I believe it's like 35% or to 40% of carbon emissions because of buildings, and also tearing down buildings because what we put in buildings a long time ago, now you're tearing them down to build new buildings. You're releasing all of that mess in the air. So when you're talking about modular construction, which is what we do, shipping container, whether you're working with shipping containers or building with metal frames or panels, that's a type of modular construction. And why that's more sustainable is because we build in a factory, right? We're building, 99% of what we do is in the factory. And so we're sending about 0.5% less waste to landfills, especially in the recycling component. So it's very circular. Less carbon footprint because we're building everything in one space, and we're building while the site work's being completed. And so the carbon footprint really is, most of the carbon footprint is delivering an almost completed unit to the site. So how we're building is one part of that sustainability piece, which I love about it. So we can build multiple houses at one time versus having to come to each site every time and build this and build that, little by little. And then, of course, recycling the materials, using local materials, regional materials as much as we can. That supports obviously the sustainability component and sustainability metrics. And if you look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which have been great for us to kind of use as themes for our sustainability measures, it also includes like you mentioned, the solar piece, which we're just now talking about, solar and sensor technology to support self-smart spaces. And because the spaces are small, that requires less battery and less solar usage as well. And so again, the smaller the space, the easier it is to sort of have that conversation.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are the components. And then the workforce piece, that's the sustainability component, establishing smaller micro factories. Our factory now is about 25,000 square feet. And our idea is to scale that and build other small factories in urban communities where we are hiring locally. So that sustainability piece of workforce is also part of our goal.
Got it. So how did you get tied in with NASA?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I don't know if I really know. We were invited to an event by one of our angel investors to meet local, well, not actually not local, but national politicians, sort of movers and shakers in the political arena. And one of the ladies, attendees at that function, does a lot of work. All her, basically, she's a philanthropist and does all her work regarding veterans. Right. And somehow she knew these individuals at NASA. I still don't know how she knows them, but she connected us to NASA Goddard, and she's like, "Hey, you all need to listen to Wanona's story and Mākhers Studio story, and you need to talk." And so when I had my initial conversation with NASA Goddard, it was really about, hey, we love what you're doing because we need to figure out how we're going to live on the moon and other planets. And I was like, whoa, we're still trying to figure out how to live here together on planet Earth, and you want me to talk about living elsewhere? And they say that's one of the problems. How can you help us have that conversation around policies for living together here and scaling that up there? And so that's. And they said, come to this summit. We've never had it before. And I said, okay. And it's been going since then. It's been interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. Because you was telling me a lot of what NASA's doing. I had heard, but I didn't know that they were, they basically want to create everything that's on Earth there, right? So you have like shipping stuff.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of astromining before, but looking for water on different planets and stuff like that. So let me ask you, which if you had to choose which planet to live on, which would it be? And you can't say Earth.
Oh man, I can't say. I was going to say Earth too. Well, one of our close advisors says she wants to retire on Mars. That sounds good, just because we've done a little bit more work on research on Mars and probably other planets, at least that I'm aware of. So, although Saturn and Venus are pretty cool to me too, but
right.
I'll say Mars for now.
Mars, yeah.
I was a Total Recall fan, the movie, so
Yeah. I don't know. I would say the moon because it's close to Earth. So if anything happens to the moon, I can come back quicker. So
a little bit quicker. That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they're wanting to do. They want to do the moon first, and then use that as the jump off point.
Yeah. So what was it? We touched on it a little bit about when you was growing up in Atlanta, but what was the catalyst that made rap blow up in Atlanta the way it did, and how Atlanta became like the Mecca for like the past? I would still even consider Atlanta to this day like a Mecca for rap or whatever. But for a point, it was like all the hottest artists were coming out of Atlanta or going through Atlanta. But from your experience growing up there, what was that catalyst that pushed Atlanta in that way?
I think it was just it was the experience of growing up here that led to it. I mean, listening to lyrics from Outkast now, I mean, I know exactly what intersections they're talking about, what happened at those intersections. Everything's relatable. Even talking about, listening to Goody Mob, talking about the Olympics came and now everybody's gone. They didn't say it that way, but that's what they were talking about. Heavily policing communities, and of course you had, the 2000s with the Black Mafia family and how all of that trend, that inspired the rap at that particular time. So really, I mean, everything is just so relatable to what I call old Atlanta, and expressing that through just authentically expressing what it was like to live and grow up here.
Yeah.
And from, like I said, from police to segregation, and then from Atlanta becoming segregated to the beloved city, which is what the tagline is now, which is what Dr. Martin Luther King talked about and described Atlanta as being, and the first black mayor, Mayor Jackson, and the politics of that, and a black real estate development. 60% of Atlanta's real estate, that the city, it's like skyline, it was designed and developed and built or developed by Mr. Herman Russell, who, if you have time, please read his autobiography. It's on Amazon. I used to grow up wanting to be him, and establishing roles for black entrepreneurs to be vendors with the city, and the growth of the airport, which is Atlanta Jackson Hartsfield Airport is the busiest airport in the world and one of the largest for a reason. That was because of the work black politics created back in the day. That still resonates there now. Although I don't think a lot of people know the history of where they worked and which they did, because they'd appreciate it a lot more, I think. But and so the music, if you know all of that history, you'll hear it in the music in Atlanta, and the dancing. Honestly.
Yeah. I didn't know that about the airport. I actually like going to the Atlanta one because the Delta Lounge. Is it the Delta Lounge?
Yep.
Yeah, the Delta Lounges are like always on 10. Right?
Yes, that's the headquarters. We're the headquarters. Yep.
Right, because I think they have three. I think they have three there. Like I can never get into the Amex Lounge. So I usually, if I'm flying Delta, I just go to the Delta Lounge.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing, Corey, about Atlanta is, I'm sorry, I'm smiling because my mom is watching the baby. I am a new mom, and Mom was just showing me I'm sure your audience will not care and not want to know, but she just pooped. We've been waiting for her to poop for like a couple of days.
Oh, wow.
So she was just showing me the diaper.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, you don't think about it until you're a parent. It's like, please, I just need you to, But, yay, I'm so excited.
So I got a funny thing about it.
Yeah.
I interviewed a chiropractor, and she did an alignment for like a baby. And the baby had been constipated, and then she did a thing to the baby, and the baby like pooped on her.
Oh no! Well, look,
I guess she had a blockage in her lower back.
Yeah, she just. Oh, okay, and it just. Yeah, that's fine. Please do, because I'm so. I wrote the pediatrician this morning. I'm like, we need something, and I'm in the shower like, oh, I forgot last week I gave her peanut butter and strawberries and did it today, and I think that helped. But one of the things I was going to say, Corey, I'm glad you mentioned mentioned Delta Lounge. So a big part of Atlanta's culture too, when you were asking me about the culture and growing up here, and how that has affected the music. Atlanta has a very interesting. It's a dichotomy, because you have, old Atlanta, old Atlanta, and just the Atlanta, the authentic Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And you have corporate Atlanta. And corporate Atlanta is Delta, Coca-Cola, FedEx, and there's a huge gap in between the two. And you often see in cities, and it's not just Atlanta, but a lot of resources going to corporate, but the corporate's bragging about being in an urban environment with music and street art and all that kind of thing, but those funds don't reach those communities. And now what we have is this really weird middle space that I call New Atlanta, which I don't know what that is. It's almost kind of like very individualistic, whereas old Atlanta was all about the collective. And so there's some really interestingly weird gaps there. Historically, just like other cities, when you look at from a race standpoint and infrastructure standpoint, which is why I love talking about infrastructure and inequality, because it runs hand in hand.
Right.
Certain streets change names because the streets that were named one thing, we still have those names, were predominantly black. Then we cross one street that is east to west street. North of that becomes a different name because those are wealthier communities, white communities. So there were black communities in the south, white communities to the north, and then all of a sudden it sort of shifted when you start seeing the AUC, so Morehouse, Spelman, Morris Brown, communities, predominantly communities to the south and west, and white communities to the north and northwest. Now, or north and northeast, now you're seeing an east and west shift where it's not really just race, it's class. And I don't think that was planned. And I don't think enough people talk about that either, because now you're seeing wealthier black people and not as wealthy black people.
Yeah, because I actually noticed when I was like living in the Bay for a few years, like most of the people who worked in the tech that were black, they weren't from the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And then it was rare to find like a local black Bay Area native who actually worked in tech. I can only think of one right now, one person. I'm sure there was more. Actually, I just thought of two, but most of the time they weren't from the Bay Area. They were, effectively moved there like I was, right? Like from all over the country. So it's it's very crazy when you say that, because even there's a neighborhood in San Francisco called Hunters Point, and Hunters Point didn't have they're like the last black enclave in San Francisco. It was actually where the Hiroshima bomb was built, the nuclear bomb.
Really?
And it's supposed to be like residue still there.
Oh, wow.
But they lack like computer resources, but you got in this area where, where most of your new billionaires are coming from, tech focused. So, like you said, I mean, it's happening. We see it everywhere.
Right. Yeah. So definitely here, and I think that has the new Atlanta piece has really affected the newer rap music and hip hop that's coming out of the city.
Do you? I think I already know what you're gonna say, but do you like the new rap that's coming out of Atlanta?
Yeah, I do, but I also think I don't know if it's going to be as long lasting as some of the older music.
Yeah.
It's become its own thing, and it's created a different type of rap music everywhere, which is seems to be the Atlanta way, which is awesome. But I also do think that kind of rap, I don't know if it's going to be as long lasting as the old rap music. Yeah.
Do you? I'm not sure how much you're keeping up with the Young Thug case and stuff that he's going through. Have you seen? Because I think he's been on trial for like a year now, maybe two. Mm-hmm. Have you seen any difference in the way that rappers move in Atlanta now because of that, or are they just like doing what they were doing before? Because they're essentially using his lyrics, a lot of stuff he was saying on the record against them.
Ooh, that's a good question. I honestly don't know. So I've been a little bit more underground than I probably should, just because we're focusing on the business. And a lot of those, well, I call them kids, but now rappers who, grew up with Young Thug's music are also gentrified out of the community already. And so that youth who I would have leaned on to learn more aren't around as much as they used to be.
Right.
So yeah, I honestly don't know. I mean, and to be honest with you, I don't even listen to a lot of new rap as much as I probably should. I'm still Kilo Ali and Outkast and Goody Mob, to be honest with you. So yeah, I don't. But no, that case is extremely huge here in the city. It's been going, like you said, for a long time. I think, though, it has opened up, not just Atlanta, the eyes behind the operations of how people move, what it takes to be in those positions, what it takes to be a musician, and how and once you become that and you're in the spotlight, how do you move with this new life I think that's being exposed and more revealing just for the music industry, period.
Yeah. Right.
And because everybody, so that the eyes are focused on Atlanta, everybody's like, okay, we might need to rethink this music industry and entertainment industry in a different way, which I think is good. I think those questions need to arise, and I think people need to understand that you can't just come to Atlanta and think you're going to be in Young Thug's position. That's not how that works. Before the trial, it takes a lot of work. It takes certain experiences, life experiences. It takes certain connections. It takes being at the right place at the right time. But even being in the city, you have to do the work, and that's what people don't get. You have to put in the time. You got to put. I'll give it to those musicians, no matter whether they're in court or not or in prison. They put in the time to put out quality music that resonates with a lot of people. You're just not going to find those same lyrics in every city because every city is different in a certain way. And so I think, but the being able to relate to what these guys are saying is universal, however. And I think no better city than Atlanta for them to do that. So it's like I said, it's been a minute since I've even looked into that trial. I have no idea what's happening now. And there's so much going on, of course, and then a lot of distractions because a big part of the trial was DA Fonnie Willis. And of course, everybody knows what this, on a different light for DA Fonnie Willis. And so it shifted the focus of all of that to something else.
Yeah, and to touch on that, I was kind of surprised, but I'm not sure which DA under her as well as working on the Young Thug case or the YSL case. But I was surprised that they didn't use the same argument that the Trump defense lawyer did too. I would have thought that they could have, but again, I don't know if they both were working on.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure of that either. Similar charges from Fonnie Willis with the using RICO as a defense on her end for both YSL and Trump. But yeah, I'm not sure because I didn't even know that much about DA Fonnie Willis, having not paid that much attention to Young Thug and YSL until Trump came along and that defense. Yeah, and it's like, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's the same. That's right, same woman. But same office anyway. But yeah, I'm not sure who's working on that now.
Yeah, they basically ruled. So with Trump's case, she's still on Trump's case.
She's still on Trump's case. Yeah,
the special attorney had to step down.
Right. They went ahead and agreed to that, but she is still on Trump's case, and nobody's really talking about it down here anymore. I kind of figured that was going to happen. Give it a couple of weeks. But but now she was up for re-election. I think she's up for re-election. Yeah. Other than that, I mean, she's still on the case per that judge, and I believe that judge actually clerked in her office when he was starting out. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I think he did. I think if you research it, I think he clerked in her office.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So do you actually think those charges are going to stick against Trump?
History tells a lot, and I can say that it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. It would surprise me if they did.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. It would surprise me if they did. Yeah. If it was anyone else, yes.
Yeah.
If it was me or you, yes. It wouldn't even taken this long. I will say though, I'm glad I'm not in that situation because I probably would be very vengeful and go after the prosecutor that tried to prosecute Fonnie and it didn't work. So I probably would have gone after her, or the defense. I probably would have gone after prosecutor. I probably would have gone after her. Forgot her name. But yeah, it would really surprise me if he. I mean, the other fake electors here, and some of the ones they just actually announced in Michigan. What's Michigan? They must have said something because the whole attitude against them changed under her office. So somebody cooperated. One of the fake electors, indicted fake electors. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, she seems to be very good at what she does.
Yeah.
even though that other mess took place, which was immaterial to Trump anyway, but that's not how the media spun it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I knew they was gonna go after her hard because I was like,
Hmm.
when you got that level of money and power and the way that Trump moves,
Yep.
he moves how you would move in corporate.
Right. Right.
Um, get them lawyers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then of course, interestingly, this is a red state, but the governor here is not really a fan of Trump, and vice versa. And when the questioning of her ethics came up, the governor's office pretty much said we're not going to support any craziness. Let her do what she's going to do. And so that was very interesting because it could have easily stopped what she's doing. And I forgot what their power structure around that was, but they allowed it to continue.
Yeah. So this leads me to another question. Why is it important as an entrepreneur to understand politics?
Oh, very. Well, first of all, if you want to become an entrepreneur, you need to do it to solve. My recommendation is that you do it to solve a problem, and usually that problem has something to do with people, right? And that's literally what politics is. And so, to be able, number one, as entrepreneurs, it's a good idea to participate in in the body politic because you are providing a service and a product where you're going to need engagement and support from those entities, whether they are government agencies that can provide you with some kind of economic incentive or support, or just the people in general and communities who you will need to test and prototype for your ideas to make sure that your ideas work. Understanding how you impact society means you should be participating in politics. Now, the question is, what is your role in that, right? Like, our role is not to be. We're not on the front lines. We're not in the streets protesting. We're too busy building new ways of new ideas and new systems. And so, either you're going to be tearing systems down or you're going to be building systems up. And so, part of knowing what your role is understanding how politics work and finding where you fit and where you can be most helpful. From a workforce standpoint, being able to support and hire locally and provide livable wages. And so understanding how those politics work, and where do people live? Where do they thrive? What are the school systems like? Are there opportunities for the school board openings? Because maybe you're realizing that, we need more trades-oriented students and more STEM-focused students. How can I support that as a school board member? So, there's so many different ways to participate, but yes, entrepreneurs should definitely participate in the political space. Being an entrepreneur is political. You really have to know how to play the game, play a room, pitch, tell your story. And telling your story is all about an experience. It's all about how you live within communities and among other people. And the more well-versed you are, as you know, Corey, storytelling, the better you are as an entrepreneur. And I didn't realize that until recently. In fact, one of the NASA partners is a film producer who I was speaking with on that initial NASA call. And this film producer helps entrepreneurs tell stories. And how do we tell the story of our living together and exploring other planets and living together other places? And it's pretty deep and sort of fascinating when you think about it. So the storytelling is political. Politicians do it all the time. Some are very bad at that and some are good at that. Some are extremely persuasive and some aren't. But when you really peel back the layers, and our angel investor told us this, and she's been in the tech world for a very long time, very, very long time, one of the first tech investors out of Silicon Valley and the Northeast. And she said, at the end of the day, companies support founders. They don't support companies. It's the founders first. It's the story. They know who they want to support. And so the more I'm in this game, the more frustrated I've become with pitch decks and things like that, because I know they already know who they're going to support. And my story is who I am, no matter how many pages in the deck that I write.
Right. Yeah. So who's your favorite storytellers? And that can be anybody you can think of. Who are your who would you say are like your top three storytellers that you've seen?
As far as authors, or as far as producers, or
As far as people who you think really nail like telling their
mm,
story. So it could be
that's a
um
good question.
it could be entrepreneur, I mean it can
Hmm.
be civil rights activist,
Yeah, that's a great question.
CEO.
Mm. That's a really good question. There's so many. How to think about that one. A good storyteller. And there are some good CEOs that are really great at that I've come across. Hmm. I had to think about that core and come back to that at the end of the end of the session. That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
a really good one. I mean, like I said, Herman Russell's book, his autobiography, is a great storyteller because the story is so compelling about being an entrepreneur, especially in a time when everything was segregated, and you somehow managed to impact not just Atlanta, but there are people now that some of my colleagues run into who have said, I would not be in business if it was not for him supporting and hiring me as a vendor in this business till this day. Um,
Wow.
and that kind of impact in his telling the story of that, it's a book which is quite amazing. I think it's Building Atlanta, but it is on Amazon. And that's just someone from personally that I grew up around, grew up near,
Yeah.
that I could mention. But I need to think about, because I know it. I just need to think, like, give you a couple examples. I will say though that some of the majority of uh, colleagues, family, and friends, or who have invested in our company, who have become really strong advisors in our company, have not been anyone in our space, in our industry. The
Mm,
majority of them have been journalists, actually, or some form of storytelling, which I never thought would have taken place. But they have been some of my greatest supporters. And so when I have to do pitch decks or when I have to tell my story, they are extraordinarily critical of how I do it because they know the value. And especially now with our political climate today, storytelling is really, and truth telling is really important. Um, but yeah, I noticed that the last few years, actually since we've known each other, I've been totally surrounded by journalists and storytellers
mm.
and producers, and now of course musicians back here in Atlanta. It's just been totally no one in my space, no one in my industry.
Yeah.
It's all been, yeah.
Do you think it's because of the blue hair? Like, why do you think you attract the journalists, and storytellers?
Um, well, I think it's the work that because I'm doing something that they don't know how to do. The built environment touches each and every one of us.
Right.
The blue hair does attract a lot of attention, and it's turned out to be sort of a signature color. Our logo is the same color,
Mm.
and how I wear it. And the funny thing is, I don't know why it attracts so much attention because people have colored hair all the time, but for whatever reason, it does. I'll stick with that. I'll stick with that. But it also, I've noticed, a lot of young people are attracted to it as well, which is helpful because it helps sort of cross boundaries. People are more interested in, like, oh, you own a construction manufacturing company and that's how you look. Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. So it becomes a little bit more relatable, and people have said, yeah, we can tell you're from Atlanta. Exactly. That's not a surprise that you have blue eyes. But part of it is purposely putting myself as an entrepreneur in rooms that one would never think I should be in, or I would be in. I've realized that within your industry, there's only so much you're going to learn, and
Right.
so sometimes it's beneficial to take that leap and go to take trips, travel, and go to summits and conferences that sort of touch you in a very interesting way. Maybe it's a music conference. Why would I go to a conference that's a historical conference about Southern hip hop? Well, because it touches me in a way from a personal experience, and it's music. The funny thing is, there are a lot of individuals in there who, because they are musicians, are still creatives like us.
Right.
Right. And so their platform is different, but the conversations I've had with musicians, and some of our clients that are musicians, they get it. Like, they totally just understand why we do what we do, and they're like, how can I get what you build? And we want to use what you're doing to build, music studios for kids to express themselves. They get it. Street artists. I'm actually been hiring street artists to do some graffiti artwork within our factory, so that when people walk in, they see the kind of company we are. We want to redefine what people think construction manufacturing industries are, because it touches all of us. It's not just a certain good old boy, frat boy like person sitting in the C-suite. No, it's someone that looks like me, and they get it. So I purposely put myself in rooms where I'm the only person that looks the way I look, so that we can build different tables for different people to join those rooms. Yeah. I had a one journalist who I don't really care for. It was a black journalist who had a problem with my saying that. He was like, "Why are you putting yourself in spaces that you're not wanted, when you can just stay over here and be in a space that you are?" And literally, that's not good business sense. And then who said I'm not wanted there? Who made that statement? I'm going to go where I think I should be for the betterment of what I'm doing, for better impact. And guess what? There are generations before me who fought for me to be able to go where I want to go, right? And so if you stay in the same spot around the same people doing the same thing, there's no room for progress. And so if that's your philosophy, fine. That just doesn't work for me. And the amount of people, you just never know who's sitting next to you. My grandmother used to say that. You never know who is listening in the audience.
Right.
And the NASA event was a huge validation of that, because these are people who are, solving the fountain of youth by using lasers and quantum physics to eradicate cancer and put 3 to 5 to 10 years back on your life. These are people who are, hiring and sending their own astronauts to space to live in 2027 and building their own spacecraft. There's no so why would I not want to be in that kind of a space?
Right.
You just never know what those opportunities are. And so, yeah, I think a lot of it comes just to what interests me and attracts me as an entrepreneur. And creatives attract me. People who, and that's all they do, and they're good at what they do. That's the other thing, quality work. People who build things attract me. It doesn't have to be construction. People who build songs, design, produce music like that, as a talent I don't have. And so why not but be around someone who is of that talent? And I've done that. And as different as we are, the conversations are quite compelling.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they have a pot of money that you just don't know that they might have. That
exactly.
You just never know. And I told at NASA on the panel, they asked me about the future, and I said, I believe the future is multidisciplinary. We've got to be able to, as entrepreneurs, see the world in cross disciplines. You got to be able to be adaptive, and you know this very well, Corey, on what I'm saying. Be adaptive, and it's more than resilience. It's what I call prosilience. So proactively putting yourself out there in various rooms, talking with scientists, talking with musicians. In fact, one of my new colleagues I met at NASA who recently visited me, I posted it on Instagram. She's a violist, world-renowned violist from Atlanta. Met her at the NASA summit, and she was playing her viola and talking about particle theory. It's like, where did that come from? But and I used to play the violin pretty terribly when I was a kid. But being around her and being around her genius in playing music, but then how that translated to science, and then what I'm doing, and she's helping kids in the favelas in South America into Juilliard. That's no different than us helping kids, build space shuttles one day, So the world is amazing, and as much negativity as we hear every day, there's some amazing quality, positive work out there, and you really have to put yourself out there to do that in different ways.
Right. Gosh, that was a question I was going to ask. Forgot it. So you mentioned that when we spoke about 2 weeks ago or a couple weeks ago, you said this is the person that's taught you the best business principles, better than any other book. Who is this person, and like, what are some things that they've told you or that you gleaned from them? Like, okay, this is you're working with you is better than getting the MBA.
So that was a Herman Russell book. That was a Herman Russell book, and it was like I think every page has some highlighter on it. I can't even read it anymore. I took so many notes and made so much stuff. But so number one, grew up wanting to be Herman Russell, but then really reading his story. And again, just growing up in these United States and growing up in the South, but growing up Black, we were often taught, especially older generations, to your obligation is to give back. Your obligation is to participate in change, to be a change maker and a change agent. And you sort of automatically think, oh, that means I got to go protest and do all this stuff. Right. And that's not the case. I mentioned that earlier. And one of the things he talked about was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Andrew Young and David Abernathy, all these civil rights icons would be over his house and, swimming and whatever. And he's like, okay, Dr. King, Martin, when am I going to be part of the protest? I'm so excited what I need to do. And they're like, you're never going to be part of the protest. It's like, well, why not? And he's like, because we need you to bail us out. You're making the money. We need you to be behind the scenes. We need you to keep getting us jobs so that when this does work, we're ready to go. Because Herman was in the rooms, he was being the only Black man in the room. He was the one working to get the airport expanded and with prior to Mayor Jackson, but especially with Mayor Jackson. He was the one helping to work, getting procurement offices so they can procure small businesses, and he was a developer at the same time. So he was at the chamber meetings, and we know how powerful these chambers can be still, especially till this day. So they're like, no. We don't need you in the front lines. We need you in the back building while we're tearing stuff down. And that was really impactful for me because it was like, aha, I feel more comfortable in that space. And it just made more sense for the kind of work that I want to do, the mission and why I want to do it, and vision. But there are other things, of course, in his book, talking about quality work. I always do quality work, even if it takes you longer, because that's what people are going to remember you by. And just the way he viewed the work that he did and the impact that he made. Again, that was one of the most impactful business books, not just real estate, but business books and just living books I've ever read.
Yeah. So how do you juggle, being a co-founder, wife, raising a kid? How do you juggle all that?
I don't. I haven't figured that out yet. I have a lot of help. Well, it does help that we own our own business. And so we actually have a playpen set up in our factory right now for her. And so, the ability for us to take the time we need when we need to take it and when we want to take it, that's helpful. We know we have a really bad maternity system and family leave system here in this country. And in fact, I met a lady at a playground a couple of weeks ago from Ukraine, and she's like, yeah, we get like 18 months of maternity leave. It's like, man, that's crazy. We're close to that here. But being an entrepreneur, now being an entrepreneur is hard. I don't want people to think that, you have all the time in the world. No, that's not how it works. But you do have more of an opportunity to control where your time is spent. And then my mom, lives with us. she still has her 9 to 5, so that holds us down too. I've heard people say, "Oh, well," no, there's no clash. Both of them are great because, and the longer you can keep your 9 to 5, the better if you're becoming an entrepreneur, for a lot of reasons. But just one of the main reasons I wanted to come back home, because I knew we were going to be wanting to expand our family, was to make sure that my mom was there, and that my daughter grew up with her grandmother, because I grew up with mine. And Corey, how important those generational connections are.
Right.
And people are starting to rethink that now, come back to that, especially with the lack of affordable housing. You can't afford to have 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 homes anymore. That's just not working. Mm-hmm. And so having her here, has been a lifesaver. And then having a husband, Kevin, who's a present father, amazing father. Well, he's at the factory now. I'm here doing this, and he's taking care of that. Has been very helpful, and then just a support system all around. And then having the confidence to say, listen, I can't do this, what I was doing anymore. As an entrepreneur, one of the things that I've learned is that no is actually a good word. It's taken me a while, but it's not that we were taught that it's bad, but it's actually a quite nice word, no. Yeah. For a lot of reasons, and you know that as well. But as a mom now, it's like, no, I can't do it. Nope. I'm not physically able to do it anymore. Nope. Our whole, everything's changed. I will say though, I'm so glad I waited later in life to have a baby. Physically, it's being younger is better, but mentally, you're just at a different place when you're in your 40s and 50s. I'm 42, but yeah, and then being home, that helps. being in Atlanta helps.
Yeah. So last question. You talked about how you met Bigg Dipp. I thought that was really funny about how you met. Can you talk about how you met Bigg Dipp?
Yeah. So we were giving a tour of our factory last August, to Mayor Andre Dickens, who's the mayor of the city of Atlanta, I reached out to my network, and we had probably 60 people there, and the mayor didn't know that a lot of people in my network are probably in his network too, or are in his network. And one of the local developers that I know he does business with Bigg Dipp, who, for your audience, Bigg Dipp is a member of Goody Mob, Goody Moby. And it's funny because I grew up with Goody Mob, right? Of course I know who Bigg Dipp is.
Yeah.
And my husband, Kevin, actually started listening to Outkast before we met in Durham. So when we met, it fit. He's from South Dakota originally. And so he knew of Outkast, but didn't really know Goody Mob until I showed, he knew CeeLo, but not Goody Mob until we came here. And we were walking to City Hall for a meeting, and this was a couple of years ago, and I said, yeah, only in Atlanta will pictures of Outkast and Goody Mob be on a wall, in the mayor's office. And so he became familiar with Goody Mob, and we started the tour, and all of a sudden Bigg Dipp walks in with his developer friend, and he immediately goes to Kevin, my husband, and they go off towards the back somewhere, and I'm like, I'm the one from here. How come I don't even get to have that kind of conversation? But as the tour continues, I'm Bigg Dipp sitting down on his phone. I sat down next to him. I started actually rapping some of the Goody Mob lyrics, and he started finishing the lyrics for me. I'm like, yeah, I actually know. My grandmother was a fan, so I don't even remember what song I was rapping at that point. And then somebody from, I think it was from the city or someone came up to me, and they were like, oh, we love what you're doing, Wanona, with affordable housing and containers. And before I could respond, he gets off his phone and he's like, then where's her check? She needs her check. We don't need to have a conversation about anything else. Where's her check? She's local. She's a native. Where's her check? And then he went back on his phone. I thought that, and it took all I could not to laugh, because I'm like, exactly. Where's my check? Y'all know I'm here. Let's go. We're ready to go. Right. And, but of course, Mayor Dickens knows him very well. Some of our other colleagues, Bame, who was there. Bame is part of a collaborative called Atlanta Influences Everything, which is amazing. I love, and I have AIE shirts, and that tagline says a lot about Atlanta. Their branding has been amazing. And so, of course, Bame was there when he saw Bigg Dipp. He's like, Wanona? I was like, yeah, I know of Wanona now, And now, Bigg Dipp shares a lot of, post that I post on Instagram, he shares it in his network, which is awesome. And again, that's what Atlanta is about. And not many places I don't think you're going to find, celebrities of that stature, like literally walking up the street next to you. That's just how Atlanta is. We just don't find that every day. It's like, oh, there's so and so, and the same with politicians as well. Oh, there's so and so, and so we were talking about old Atlanta stuff. My godfather was there too, and we were talking about old restaurants that are now closed and high school and all that kind of thing. And it was just like, man, I can't believe this Goody Mob. Like, we're like one person away from so and so. But yeah, Bigg Dipp is cool. Bigg Dipp is funny. And even at the end, Kevin is literally for that whole next week and a half, he's like, Goody Mob was there. I mean, Bigg Dipp was there. Like, I know, yeah, I know. We used to get our haircut at Killer Mike's barber shop some years ago. We haven't been there in a while, but again, this is the kind of community that was built, old Atlanta. That it's funny how life works. We're even more connected now than we were back then because of a lot of the problems that are today. Like, we're being connected to solve problems. And again, these are musicians, and they get it. They totally get it, and super excited to see me, a black woman who's from Atlanta, owning a business like this. But Bigg Dipp is, and so when you follow Bigg Dipp on Instagram, the way he is on Instagram is the way he is in person. He is hilarious, but so down to earth. Like, it's not even funny. Of course, that's just Goody Mob anyway. But yeah, Bigg Dipp is funny, and I mentioned it to him one more other time, and I was like, I think I wrote him on Instagram. I was like, thanks for talking about the check. He's like, yeah, where's your money? Let me know how that goes. So from now on, I'm going to, as part of my supporting entrepreneurs just starting out, as I progress, young entrepreneurs, I think that's going to be my tagline when I'm sitting next to them to help them. Where's their check? No more talking. There's enough to go around. I'm tired of pitch competitions for crumbs. Where's their check? They put in the work. I don't need you to do the work. I need you to write me a check. That's what I need you to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just thought I thought another question. So, tell us about your house. Tell us the history about your house.
Oh yeah, so we live in a trap house, well, formerly a trap house. It was one of the last remaining trap houses in the city, I guess. And it was actually the house itself was owned by an older generation R&B singer, and why her name is Millie Jackson. And of course, Millie was huge when I was a baby. So, yeah, this was a trap house. And when we moved in, it literally was nothing in it. Everything had been ripped out. And the house next door to us has a vault in the backyard. My understanding is that vault leads to a tunnel system through the neighborhood where people were running drugs throughout and escaping under the different alleys, city alleys. And that vault is still there. You can see the vault. I don't know how they got it in because it literally is going to take a crane to get that thing out. It's pretty impressive. Wow. Kind of want to see what's under there. I kind of don't because I'm not sure if there's going to be money under there or bones under there or what. This area was huge back in the 90s during the drug game too, especially. And so there's a lot going on. So you had a lot of the Jamaican demographic, huge Muslim demographic, which we still have. And Goody Mob talks about that in their songs. One of their songs, Dirty South, they talk about the Red Dogs, which was a notorious police force that scared everybody. And they were big in this neighborhood too. And you're talking about like linebacker cops that just were sort of out of control. But they say that in their song, 1 to the 2 to 3 to 4, those dirty red dogs, and hit the door. And,
I think yeah,
and they got everybody on their hands and knees, and they ain't gonna leave till they find them keys. So, so that was this neighborhood, and we'd see Lamborghinis pulling up at the apartment building next door. So, wow. Yeah, it's and we've had people stop us in the street. Hey, so and so used to live here. Did y'all find that money hidden in the fireplace? Like, well, no. You sure? Because in the back room to the right, there was money hidden in that wall, and they're actually explaining the house very correctly. And it's like, well, not when we got here because everything was ripped out. Sorry. But
Yeah, somebody probably ran through that.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. But it was it. This was a trap house. Sure was. And
Wow.
we've had representatives from like Clark Atlanta stop by the house when we were first starting out because we built one of our units. We have it in our backyard as our prototype. And they were interested in what we were doing. This was some years ago for maybe a housing for around the AUC, the Atlanta University Center, which we're not far from. And one of the main guys in that meeting from Clark Atlanta said, "Yeah, we remember this house. This was notorious. So we were looking at purchasing this house for the college, and it was." They were like, "This neighborhood was rough. This house," he said, "I can validate this was a trap house, literally." Yeah. And it's so funny because 2 Chainz's Pink Trap House was big when we moved back to Atlanta. And I was passing it one day and totally forgot about it. I'm like, why are all these people on Northside Drive? And what is this Pink House? And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. The Trap House. And one of the artists from Durham, I think I mentioned it on Instagram, and he wrote me, he's like, pump the brakes. That's the Trap House, dude. You got to go back and check it out. And I was like, well, we actually live in one, so I don't know. But to your podcast name and the work that you've been doing, Corey, I can literally say we weren't necessarily trapping that way, but we are living in one. We literally are speaking truth to power when we about who we build for and why we do what we do. Yeah,
Exactly.
We experience it every day. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I thought I was ended on that note. It'd be funny, like you live in a former trap house.
Yeah. It's funny how a lot of people know about their house more than we do. Yeah.
Wow.
Celebrities included, rappers included.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, we've had some rappers say that. They know exactly where this house is.
That's funny. That's funny.
And now it has like this garden out front, it's this whole different. But they're like, no, it's not. You're like, it's not.
Cool. Anything you want to share about your next moves with Mākhers Studio?
Yeah, we're finally at that point. Corey, of entrepreneurs at the companies, it's a good problem to be where you're about to really grow real quick, and you got to figure out how to scale your operations, which is a good problem to finally be able to, have tax returns that show you're growing revenue, and you can finally bring home income. Yeah, being an entrepreneur isn't easy.
That's definitely true. Yeah,
it's very emotional. And it's very emotional, and having a baby and doing it at the same time isn't easy either. It's not. But I will say people love babies, so maybe that helps a little bit. But I would just tell any entrepreneur to stick with it, because a lot of times the minute you feel down, it feels like you're down and out is when something happens, even if it's small, something positive. And, to practice saying no, that's very hard, to know your worth. I didn't know that in the beginning, and it cost us money and time. But now we do, and make sure that your customers align with your values. Not everybody should be your customer.
I like that. Yeah. I love that. Cool. I think we can end that there.
Sorry about the Wi-Fi.
Oh no, it's all good. It's all good. It came out really good. So
okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Corey, for inviting me to participate on the podcast, and so good to see you again. Of course, it's been a long time, so one day in person we'll be able to hopefully meet up.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it's so great to still have this connection.
Yeah, likewise. Good seeing you. Glad you're doing well. We didn't touch on why you left Durham, but I think it's some of the reasons why I left North Carolina. So
and it's just time. Sometimes it's just time to go.
Time to go. Yeah, it's time to go.
Follow the timing. It never lies.
Yep. But thanks for taking the time with me.
Thank you.
Everyone, Corey, Stay Trapping, Trap Talks, the intersection of culture and tech. Thank you, Wanona, co-founder of Mākhers Studio, blowing up with NASA. So, but yeah,
We hope. We'll knock on wood. We're almost there.
it's gonna happen.
We're gonna speak it into existence.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.